My daughter-in-law, Samantha, standing on the porch of my brand-new Victorian house on Maplewood Avenue. She pulled a silver key from her purse, glanced over her shoulder, and slid it into the lock like she belonged there. The security camera zoomed in on her puzzled face as the key refused to turn. She tried again, and again. I sat in the living room calm and steady, watching her frustration play out on my phone. 24 hours earlier, I had changed every lock in the house and installed cameras at every entrance. It was expensive, but at that moment it felt like the best investment I had ever made. Samantha stepped back, called my son Eric, and started gesturing wildly at the door. She mouthed words I could not hear, but I already knew the story she was spinning. Maybe she would say squatters had moved in. Maybe she would say the property was being vandalized. None of it mattered, because I finally had proof. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. My own daughter-in-law had obtained a key to a house she did not own, a house I had purchased in secret to secure my future, and now she was caught. If you are watching this, take a moment to think about the people you trust most, because sometimes the biggest betrayal does not come from strangers, it comes from family. My name is Helen Montgomery. I am 64 years old, and just a few months ago I buried my husband David after his long fight with heart disease. For nearly 4 decades we had built a life together in a quiet Pennsylvania town. Our days were filled with simple routines, and even after his passing I still caught myself setting 2 places at the table out of habit. The silence of an empty house was heavier than anything I had ever carried. My son Eric began calling more often. His wife Samantha came by with home-cooked meals and a smile that looked almost too polished. At first I told myself they were only trying to comfort me, that their extra attention was born out of love. When you are grieving, you cling to any hand that reaches out, even if you do not notice the grip tightening. One evening, Eric sat across from me at the kitchen table, his voice low and careful. "Mom, you should not be alone in that old house. Dad would want you to have something fresh, a new beginning." Samantha nodded quickly, adding that they could help me figure out smart ways to use the insurance money from David's policy. She said the words like a neighbor offering kind advice, but her eyes glowed the way children look at wrapped presents under a tree. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to think they were speaking from genuine concern. But I also felt a small shift inside me, a whisper of caution that said not every smile is protection. Sometimes it is preparation. I did not yet know how far this would go. I only knew that life after David's death was about to take a turn I never expected, and family was not always the shelter it promised to be. The first time I saw the mansion on Maplewood Avenue, it felt like stepping into a memory I had not lived yet. Tall windows with curved frames, a wide porch wrapping around the front, 6 bedrooms with fireplaces that whispered stories of families long gone. The listing described it as Victorian architecture with modern updates, but all I saw was possibility. I pictured the grandchildren racing through the hallways with sticky hands and laughter that shook the stair rails. I imagined Thanksgiving dinners where the table stretched from one end of the dining room to the other, and Eric carving the turkey while Samantha passed the mashed potatoes. For a woman who had lost so much, the house felt like a way to give something back. The asking price was steep, but David had left me more than memories. His insurance policy was meant to secure my future. I realized I could use it to secure a future for all of us. Yet something held me back from telling Eric and Samantha. Maybe it was the way Samantha's smile tightened whenever I mentioned spending money on myself. Maybe it was the cautious voice that grief had sharpened inside me. So I kept it secret. I set up a trust to purchase the property quietly. The name on the deed was mine alone, and only the property management company knew the full details. For 6 weeks, workers came and went while I played the part of a grieving widow living an ordinary life. In reality, I was designing a surprise. Fresh paint covered the walls. The kitchen gleamed with new countertops. The hardwood floors shone after sanding, and the garden looked ready for summer evenings. Each decision was made with them in mind. I wanted perfection before revealing it, so that when I finally handed them the keys, they would see not just a house but the proof of how deeply I still believed in family. It felt almost childlike, holding onto a secret gift I could not wait to share. I rehearsed the moment in my head, Eric's shock, Samantha's tears of joy, my own relief as we started fresh under one roof. I thought I was preparing a blessing. I did not yet realize I was preparing the stage for betrayal. The surprise I had imagined unraveled faster than I thought possible. One Saturday morning, Eric called sounding unusually excited. "Mom, you will not believe this. We found the perfect house." Samantha had been browsing listings and stumbled upon a Victorian on Maplewood Avenue. 6 bedrooms, gorgeous kitchen, exactly what we need for the future. My hand tightened around the phone. They had discovered the very house I already owned. At first I felt almost amused, ready to laugh and reveal the truth. But then Eric kept talking. The price is high, way out of our range, but if you could help us with a down payment as an early inheritance, it might be possible. His words landed with the heaviness of a brick. Later that day, I met them at the property. Samantha walked through the front yard like a woman on stage. She gestured toward the garden beds, describing where she would place roses. She ran her fingers along the kitchen counters I had chosen, already imagining her dinner parties. She led me upstairs into the master suite I had quietly decorated for myself, declaring, "This will be perfect for Eric and me. Your room can be the small one by the guest bath. Adequate." Adequate. My sanctuary reduced to a side room, as though I were a distant relative renting space. Eric nodded along, his enthusiasm so strong he did not notice the color draining from my face. I smiled politely, but inside my thoughts spun. They were not speaking like hopeful buyers. They were speaking like owners. They had already placed me in the smallest corner of a house I had purchased for all of us. My role was clear in their eyes, the widow with money to spare, grateful for whatever space she was allowed. Samantha pressed further, speaking of her parents' needs. Her mother's arthritis, her father's medications, the dream of multi-generational living. She spoke of our needs, her voice smooth and certain, as if my inheritance existed only to serve their vision. That night, I sat alone with the property deed in my hands. My name was written clearly, yet in their minds the house already belonged to them. It was the first time I realized my gift would never be seen as generosity. It would be seen as obligation, and I was about to pay the price. The next morning, Eric called before I had even finished my coffee. His tone carried urgency, the kind that makes you sit up straighter without realizing it. "Mom, we need to act quickly. Another family is about to make an offer on the Maplewood house. If we want it, we have to put in a full cash bid today." I nearly laughed out loud. I already owned the house, yet here was my son spinning a story about phantom buyers. Still I played along, letting him talk. Samantha was beside him, feeding lines in the background. "Mom, this is an opportunity we cannot let slip," Eric insisted. "Dad would have wanted you to invest wisely." The manipulation was smooth, almost rehearsed. They pulled on my grief, painting urgency with strokes of nostalgia. If I had been a different woman, tired, distracted, lonely, I might have believed them. But my instincts told me to slow down. Eric suggested I wire the money directly, claiming Samantha had built a great rapport with the realtor and would handle all the details. That was when the whisper inside me turned into a shout. If I was putting down $350,000, I would speak with the realtor myself. Silence filled the line. Then Eric cleared his throat. "Maybe it is better if Samantha continues since she has already established trust." His words confirmed what I feared. They wanted control, not partnership. That afternoon, I called the property management company managing the house for me. "Sarah, I need you to relist the property immediately. Same price, same terms." She sounded confused. "Mrs. Montgomery, you already own the house. Why pretend to sell it again?" "Because I want to see exactly how far my own family is willing to go." Within hours, Eric called back with another miraculous update. "Great news, Mom. The other family's offer fell through. The house is available again, but we need to move fast." I stared at the phone, my chest tightening with something colder than sadness. My son, the boy I had raised with bedtime stories and peanut butter sandwiches, was lying to me with the ease of a practiced salesman. I realized then that this was no longer about helping. It was about taking. And I was done being rushed into their version of family loyalty. The following afternoon, I drove by the Maplewood house one more time before moving in. The renovations were complete, boxes of fresh paint still stacked neatly in the garage. I wanted to savor the thought of walking into my new life, not as a guest, but as the rightful owner. But as I turned the corner, I froze. Samantha's car was parked in the driveway. Beside her stood a woman I did not recognize, maybe a friend or a decorator. Samantha was waving her arms as if she were the real estate agent, pointing at the windows, explaining details I had paid for. Then, as casually as if she lived there, she pulled a key from her pocket and opened the front door. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I had never given her a key. The property manager had promised no one else had access. And yet there she was, walking another person through the living room I had refinished, measuring walls, planning furniture. I called the management company. Sarah, has anyone contacted you about the house? No, Mrs. Montgomery, you are the only one with keys. My stomach churned. Someone had believed her lies and handed her access. That evening I made my decision. I called a locksmith and had every lock changed before midnight. Then I contacted a security company. By dawn, cameras covered every entrance, discreet but powerful. The expense was heavy, but peace of mind weighed more. The very next morning I saw the payoff. Sitting with my coffee, I opened the security app and watched Samantha march up to the front porch. She pulled out the same key, inserted it, twisted, and frowned. She tried again, then harder, muttering under her breath. When it failed, she walked around to the back door. Same result. Her frustration grew visible. She called Eric, gesturing furiously, pointing at the door like a wronged customer. I could not hear their words, but I could see the story forming in her mouth. What she did not know was that I was watching her live, recording every attempt, every lie. And for the first time in months, I felt the balance of power shift back into my hands. That evening, Eric arrived at the Maplewood house looking older than his 36 years. His shoulders slumped as he stepped into the living room, glancing around at the furniture I had carefully chosen. He did not bring Samantha. That absence told me more than his words ever could. "Mom, we need to talk," he began, sinking into the armchair across from me. His voice was strained, as if carrying a weight too heavy for one person. I kept my tone calm. "How did Samantha get a key to my house, Eric?" He lowered his eyes. "She told the assistant at the property management office that you had asked her to check on the renovations. She said she was your daughter-in-law and that you were too overwhelmed to handle the details. The assistant believed her and handed over a key." I sat back, the truth hitting harder than expected. "So she pretended to act in my name," I said quietly. Eric nodded. "And there is more. When the bank called to confirm your wire transfer, Samantha answered your phone. She told them she was your financial power of attorney." The words cut through me like glass. I never gave her that authority. He knew it, and yet he had let her continue. Eric rubbed his hands together. "She thought if we handled everything for you, you would feel less pressure." I stared at him, this man I had raised to be honest and kind. Instead of protecting me, he had let his wife build a wall of lies around both of us. "So you both decided to manipulate me into funding your dream home," I said firmly. His face crumpled. It was never supposed to go this far. But it had gone that far, and the distance between us now felt wider than any house could ever fill. The next morning, my phone rang before sunrise. Samantha's name lit up the screen. For weeks she had spoken through Eric, but now she wanted to face me directly. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Margaret, she always used my first name instead of Mom. I think there has been a misunderstanding," she began, her voice dripping with forced concern. "I understand perfectly," I replied. "You obtained keys under false pretenses, you pretended to have power of attorney, and you pressured me with fake urgency. That is not a misunderstanding, that is fraud." Her tone shifted instantly, the sweetness gone. "Fine, if you want to play it that way. You bought that house just to dangle it in front of us. You knew we were searching in that neighborhood. You bought it to taunt us." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Samantha, I bought the house as a surprise gift for you and Eric. I was going to hand you the deed once it was finished." There was silence, then a sharp scoff. "Right, that is why you kept it secret for weeks. Prove it. Show me paperwork that says you intended to give it away." In that moment, I saw her clearly. In her world, generosity did not exist. Every action had a hidden angle, every kindness a scheme. She could not imagine someone spending their inheritance to bless family without expecting control in return. "I do not need to prove anything to you," I said evenly. "But I can prove that you trespassed on my property." Her voice turned cold, stripped of any disguise. "You are twisting this. Family has a right to family." "No," I said quietly but firmly. "Family has a right to honesty. What you did was not honesty." The line went silent, then ended with a sharp click. I set the phone down, my heart steady, my resolve unshaken. The mask had finally fallen, and Samantha's true face was one I could never unsee. 2 days later, Samantha appeared at my front door uninvited. She looked pale, her eyes ringed with sleepless nights, but her voice carried the same iron edge. "Helen, can we talk alone? Eric does not need to be part of this." I allowed her inside, curious to hear what excuse she would try next. She sat on the edge of my sofa, twisting her hands together before finally blurting, "I handled everything the wrong way." When I found out about the house, I panicked. We were behind on rent, bills piling up. I just wanted to secure a place for all of us. Her words sounded softer, but beneath them lay the same calculation. I asked, so instead of asking for help, you pretended to be me, lied to the bank, and stole a key. She flinched. Kevin does not know everything. Then her eyes hardened, and the confession tumbled out. My uncle is an accountant. He told me that if you signed the house over to us as an early inheritance, it would save thousands in estate taxes. We could protect the property from nursing home costs in the future. It would be smarter for everyone. I felt the air in the room shift, colder than stone. Do you hear yourself, Samantha? You are describing elder financial abuse, systematically planning to separate me from my assets by making it seem like my own idea. She shook her head quickly. That is not what this is. I was trying to protect our family. No, you were trying to secure your own comfort at my expense. For the first time, she did not argue. She simply stared at the floor, realizing I had named the truth she wanted to keep hidden. There, in my living room, with the security cameras still recording quietly in the corners, I understood how close I had come to being stripped of everything. Not by strangers, but by the people I had once trusted to carry my legacy forward. That night, I sat at the dining table in my Maplewood home, the deed resting beside a half-finished cup of tea. For weeks I had imagined this table filled with family, with Eric carving roast chicken and Samantha passing rolls. Instead, the chairs around me were empty, and the silence carried more honesty than any of Samantha's words ever had. I knew what I had to do. I would not press charges yet, though my lawyer assured me I had every right. But I would draw boundaries as sharp as the new locks on my doors. My money, my property, my decisions, those belonged to me, and me alone. When Eric called the next day, his voice careful, almost childlike, he asked if we could sit down together and work something out. I answered calmly, Eric, I love you. But I am finished making sacrifices for everyone else at my own expense. You and Samantha will need to find a home you can afford, with no strings attached to my bank account. There was a pause, heavy and painful. Mom, we just wanted what was best for the family. Best for the family cannot mean worst for me, I said firmly. In the weeks that followed, the phone rang often, pleas, apologies, bargaining. Sometimes Samantha cried. Sometimes Eric grew angry, but I stayed steady. For the first time in years, I was not bending to keep the peace. I was holding the peace by protecting myself. I began hosting neighbors for coffee, accepting invitations to the local book club, even planting flowers in the front yard, without worrying what anyone else thought. Slowly, the house became more than a fortress. It became mine in the truest sense. And with each day, the distance between obligation and freedom grew wider, until I could breathe again. 6 months later, I hosted my first real dinner in the Maplewood house. The long dining table was lined not with Eric and Samantha, but with neighbors who had become friends, the widow across the street, who invited me to her book club, the young couple whose children carried my groceries, the retired teacher who brought pies just to brighten a Tuesday. These people, once strangers, had shown me more kindness in half a year than my own family had in years. It was not the future I had envisioned, but it was honest, and honesty was worth more than any inheritance scheme. Eric and I spoke occasionally, the conversations cautious but real. Samantha remained distant, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. I visited their baby once a month, cherishing my granddaughter while refusing to forget the lessons learned. Love did not require surrender, and boundaries were not betrayal. As I cleared dishes that evening, I thought about how close I had come to losing everything, not to strangers but to my own. Yet here I was, stronger, wiser, and surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. So let this be the lesson: protect your boundaries, honor your worth, and never confuse manipulation with love. Thank you for listening. If this story spoke to you, please like, share, and leave a comment with your own experiences. Your voice matters, and together we can remind one another that self-respect is never selfish.